America, the final frontier. These are the wait, no, that's not. What exactly does it mean to be an American? Nowadays, people tend to think of like fireworks and guns and like hot dogs or just fast food in general, capitalism. But what about back in the old days when America went from just colonies that belonged to Britain to being their own thing, America? Back before most modern technology and concepts, before our current way of societal thinking, society tended to rule in favor of the white man, which they still kind of do, but people of color have historically been left out and straight up like victims of violence and slave labor from the beginning. Safe to say they weren't really seen as people, especially not equals. The tide starts to turn ever so slightly during the American Revolution. It became a concern of we're fighting for our freedom, yet we take those same freedoms away from other people every single day without a thought. And I mean, obviously, not everyone was thinking this way. It was, only a couple people, and it was like, it was a back of the mind thought. But the doubt was starting to trickle in about how they were treating these people. African Americans played a huge role in the revolution that many people kind of ignored or forgot afterwards. The military started to struggle to fill their enlistment quotas, so they decided to turn to the African American population. And I quote, "By the end of the war, 5,000 to 8,000 blacks had served the American cause by fighting in support roles or in the Navy. By 1777, some states created laws that encouraged white owners to give slaves for the army in return for their enlistment bounty, or allowing masters to use slaves as substitutes when they or their sons were drafted. However, in the South, the idea of arming slaves for military service met with such opposition that only free blacks were normally allowed to enlist in the army. During the war, there were several all-black units, led by white officers, obviously. One in particular performed bravely throughout the war and was present at Yorktown, where an observer noted it was the most neatly dressed, the best under arms, and the most precise in its maneuvers. This kind of contrasts the, stereotype that the white men had produced about them. I think seeing how African Americans, performed throughout the war kind of started to maybe shift the mindset of some people, and maybe maybe they're not what we thought. Maybe they are. Maybe they're people. Just maybe. Unfortunately, despite their help, many African Americans got minimal to no recognition, and only some of them gained their freedom. I think a decent amount of the slaves that were enlisted just went back to being slaves. Unfortunately. As time went on, more and more people began to question slavery. The Declaration literally, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, but it's not all men, is it? Is it? This form of thinking mainly took place in the northern states, while the South was pretty adamant to keep their ways of slavery. This started to kind of create a divide between the states that will eventually be the Civil War. But we're not there yet. Around the 1820s-ish, somewhere in there, the abolitionist movement started to take shape. Before, it was just, those damn Quakers. But the 3630 line was created, and that seemed to be, that was kind of cool for a minute, until we started to expand west. And then people started fighting over the states, Free state, slave state, free hat. The big question at the end of the day ended up being, what do we do about slavery? And boom, abolitionist movement. This time period is kind of where black and white men alike started to advocate for a ban on slavery. However, I think, African Americans were, protesting and advocating for, their freedom and their rights and, stop the violence. But I think the white men were doing it for, economic reasons. Those could be jobs for white men, as if it's not their fault that they're there in the first place, but whatever. Abolitionists like William Lloyd Garrison turned to the public with just pure outrage. Much haste. Yes, I'm going to read this entire paragraph very dramatically. It's what he would want. On this subject of slavery, I do not wish to think or speak or write with moderation. No, no. Tell a man whose house is on fire to give a moderate alarm. Tell him to moderately rescue his wife from the hands of the ravisher. Tell the mother to gradually extricate her babe from the fire into which it has fallen. But urge me not to use moderation in a cause like the present. I am in earnest. I will not equivocate. I will not excuse. I will not retreat a single inch, and I will be heard. The apathy of the people is enough to make every statue leap from its pedestal and to hasten the resurrection of the dead. See, he also brings up a good point. If slaves were to, magically become white, wouldn't you care? Wouldn't you be disgusted with the way your brothers were being treated? You can't say that this country was built on freedom yet still have slaves. Like, that is a direct contradiction. America was literally built on slavery, which David Walker points out. America is more our country than it is the whites. We have enriched it with our blood and tears. The greatest riches in all America have arisen from our blood and tears. And will they drive us from our property and homes, which we have earned with our blood? He also quotes the Declaration of Independence, like how I did earlier. See your Declaration, Americans. Do you understand your one language? Hear your languages. Proclaim to the world. July 4th, 1776. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Compare your own language above, extricated from your Declaration of Independence, with your cruelties and murders inflicted by your cruel and unmerciful fathers and yourselves on our fathers and on us, men who have never given your fathers or you the least provocation. Now, Americans, I ask you candidly, was your sufferings under Great Britain 100th part as cruel and tyrannical as you have rendered ours under you? Basically, calling the white men out on their hypocrisies and their bullshit. Facts. Now, all this advocating for the ban and the end of slavery absolutely enraged the South, which eventually led to the Civil War, which led to the abolishment of slavery. But that didn't exactly fix the mindset of how white people saw African Americans. But that's past the scope of what we've gone over in this class. That's past. What is this assignment? 1600 1860? Yeah, no. Spoiler alert, it doesn't get fixed until after the Civil War, which is 1864? I hope that's the right year. That's just off my brain. That's just off the dome. Okay. I'm gonna yap a little bit about women also. I have no notes for this other than one singular quote, so this is entirely just me yapping, okay? I don't know what I'm gonna say about this, though. So, women have also kind of been, excluded from the narrative. Was it to the same degree of the African Americans? No, I've never claimed that. But, they had like the African Americans, they were also a huge help in the war. I mean, they were the nurses, they'd, follow the soldiers around to fix them, they took over some of the men's jobs, like the farms and stuff. Not like Rosie the Riveter, but they did take over some of the jobs until the men got back. And again, this was kind of, ignored. And it wasn't until, the Industrial Revolution, I think, that women really started to, be used in factories, and, not used, but they were, they had jobs in factories, which was awful, because fires and stuff. I'll never forget, I saw this one, we went to the one-act competition for theater in my high school, my senior year, and there was a one-act play about that one fire with the women in it, and it made me cry really hard. That's not really related, but still. Um, but basically, men have always kind of seen women as like inferior and like they should submit to them. And from that one, the satire article of the things for the women, the second half of it. Bear in mind that you are continually weak and dependent, even if you are beautiful. This adds to your weakness and dependence. What? What? No, no, no. I mean, I get that it's kind of a joke, I guess. You know, not entirely serious. It was for a magazine. But, you know, that had to come from somewhere. You have to think that is true on some degree to write that, you know? Like, I don't know. And there's this whole, like, kind of movement where women were supposed to be, like, the pious and go to church, and they do all the things to help teach the younger generations, but also, you can't be involved in politics. Who do you think you are? You have no political rights, but you also have to teach the future generations about the politics. So you have to know it, but you can't be involved, and you can't know too much. Hello? And I do still think that, like, it's not as bad today, but I do think some of that mindset is still rooted in our culture and our society today. Like, even, I feel like there's too much. There's still, like, the concept of the pink tax, where, like, things that are typically for women cost more. You know, the wage differences, which I think is supposed to be fixed now, but I don't know. Recent, like, was the abortion ban an attack on women? I don't know, possibly. And the Department of Education just released this is supposed to be about the 1800s, and I'm talking about now. That's not. I'm just yapping, and I'm really sorry. But, point is, the men's view of women did shift from the beginning, because it was originally supposed to be that the men were like the pious and the do right, don't get tempted by the succubus. But then it turned into the women having to do that part. And I think shifting that to being the women's job may have contributed to, like, them getting jobs in the Industrial Revolution and eventually getting more rights, like being able to vote, which comes way later. I don't know. Seneca Falls. You can tell I have no notes for this and I'm just talking off the top of my head. Thank you.